In today's video, the turbocharger in a 2024 Isuzu D-MAX has taken a giant steaming dump in its stacks. The dealership, which, let's say, diagnosed the root cause of this problem, says it's all down to a foreign body. Like, I don't know, Naomi Campbell on a bearskin rug or something. And there's not a blade I know of that could withstand an imposition such as that. Let's be reasonable. So Isuzu initially said, no warranty for you, dude. But I think we can turn this around with the threat of good old-fashioned public humiliation, just like they did to scolds and adulterers, thieves and blasphemers in medieval Europe. Good times. Hey dude, if it ain't broke, let's be leaving the spanners in the toolbox, would be my friggin' advice. Details next. Today's video is brought to you by one of you, and dude named Jamie Boatwood, who needs a good rap name. And I can only think of J Wood, which isn't also a bad name for a pornographic actor, now that I think about it. Anyway, Jay Wood is a 55-year-old mechanic and the office manager of Northeast Auto Shop in Wangaratta, and a self-confessed, quote-unquote, reasonable driver, like a proper grown-up who doesn't abuse his vehicle because hashtag mechanical sympathy kind of thing. Wangaratta. Now, if you're not from around here, Wangaratta is in Victoria, but quite close to the New South Shitsville border. They have an awesome sewage treatment plant, but sadly I don't think it's open to the public. Just to the east of the Owens River, if memory serves, surrounded by majestic, busted-ass cattle scrub for, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 kilometres in most directions, especially north and west from there, kind of thing, and also east and south until you hit the ocean. That's the way we roll. Except for the desert, which is even more shitful. So come to Australia, dude. Visit Wangaratta. Pick up the shortest book on earth, Things to See and Do in Wangaratta. Imagine that. Leave your machete at home, however. Pro tip. Full details on Jay Wood's problem next. This video is possible because of my two enduring side hustles. Number one, I get new cars cheap for dudes and dudettes just like you. Mainstream cars, ordinary cars. If you want a Bentley, that's on you, dude. I don't even want to get involved with that, but if you want something conventional like a nice CX-5 or Santa Fe or Sorrento or something, you've come to the right place. You just fill in the form down there. There's no obligation. My team gets on it. We find the best price we can find without you ever going face-to-face in that snake-filled environment called the showroom floor. And when you buy the car, you get it with the full warranty and everything, just like a real new car from a real dealer, because ultimately that's what it is. We just do the negotiation for you, and we know how to play this game because we're match fit, just like the dude selling the car. So there's no imbalance of power, and we buy a lot of cars, so we get good deals. Anyway, link in the description for that. And same sort of thing with home solar, because that is such a snake and cowboy dense environment also. The thing you need is high-quality installation, and that means good installers and good components, and the system well designed to suit your specific domestic whatever, you know? And we do all of that. I've got a great solar provider. I've known the dudes who own the business for donkey's years now, and they tick every box. They've got engineers that consult on every installation, so you know it's going to work. They only use quality components and good installers who aren't just going to race off into the sunset and leave you with 100 problems to solve and you'll never see them again kind of thing. It's the opposite of that. You get onshore support for the components. So important. Not a chatbot in friggin' Shanghai. And of course, the government is just throwing wheelbarrows full of money everywhere to people who want to install a battery. And this can be a battery to your existing solar system, a battery to your existing solar system with a battery, so like a second battery, or a battery that comes complete with a brand new solar system. They really want to get batteries on people's houses, and if the government's throwing money, you might as well catch some of the tax that you've already paid back over time, right? It's rare enough. It's like grand alignment of the planets on things like home batteries right now. So catch, dude. Anyway, no obligation there either. Link in the description. And now, J Wood and the bent turbo blade from hell. So this is the 2024 D-MAX, okay, which means it has the 4JJ3 engine, the new one that came in I'm gonna say 2020 when they revealed the latest D-MAX, if memory serves. It had the dealership once over at the dealership, and after that, the 15,000 kilometre service took place at the shop where J Wood is the office manager. The dealership did not do the 15,000k service, in other words, but it was done at a qualified mechanic's shop in which J Wood works, all right? The vehicle has 26,120 kilometres on the clock before that fateful day of introw poopy. So if you don't mind, I might read to you exactly what J Wood says, and as is customary on the channel, I might do that in a stupid bogan voice, even though J Wood, it must be said, is neither stupid nor a bogan, because he writes in sentences and he divides the paragraphs. He divides groups of sentences, obviously, into paragraphs. It's almost like logical thought has gone into his communications. He's letting Team Australia down badly, therefore. Anyway, he goes, the vehicle is non-modified, i.e. no snorkel or air intake modifications. And that's going to be important down the track when we get into this, okay? Quote, also, it has never been off-road, standard urban driving only by a 55-year-old responsible driver. Situation as follows. While accelerating up a 60 kilometre after performing a U-turn, I noticed a whining/whistling sound. At first, I believed this to be a siren or emergency vehicle. I checked my mirrors and decelerated. As I slowed, the sound reduced in volume. I accelerated up to the normal speed and the sound increased in relation to RPM. Doesn't sound good, does it? Being mechanic with a trained ear, I immediately returned to my place of work. The head mechanic lifted the bonnet and observed the sound. Technically, I'm not so sure you can observe the sound. I think you have to hear the sound, but because you've written in complete contiguous sentences and you're making sense, J Wood, I'm going to give you a free pass on that one, dude. And I'm a hard marker too on this stuff. You might have noticed. Anyway, J Wood, quote, we both agreed that this was turbo related. I drove straight to Wangaratta, Isuzu. The service advisor came into the service driveway and listened to the car. Not good, was his comment. He then returned with an experienced mechanic. His comment was along the lines of, this is not a normal and or good sound. The old models used to suffer from turbo failure, but not this model. Have you ever noticed how it's always the old model that's the shitbox? Never the new one. In fact, the only time you'll ever get a car maker to agree that the previous model was a shitbox is at the launch of the next one. That's so consistently true. You know, you get there and they'll say to you, sotto voce, oh, when we saw that piece of shit the first time, we nearly had a heart attack. Isn't it good that this one's so gorgeous? Kind of thing. They'll be saying that about the Kia Tasman in, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, maybe sooner. I'm sure they're working on that at 1,000 miles an hour. Anyway, I'm wondering if it's a little too new, probably not for this 4JJ3 engine to assess its reliability. It's been in service, or at least revealed, since 2020, so probably not. Some of those cars, the high mileage ones, would have nearly 100,000 Ks on them, so the data is probably in. I know that the current one, the 4JJ3, uses this newer IHI VGT spec turbocharger, with tighter boost control and better efficiency, unquote, according to Isuzu. And the 4JJ1 used this IHI-RHV4 VGS turbo. What a mouthful. And it was so prone to VGT problems because it had so many vanes on the exhaust side, and the variable geometry actuator tended to carbonise up and lose its range, which meant that it would be kind of locked in this state of continuous overboost or underboost depending on where it decided to lock itself, which is a bit of a shit. If you want to see more on... I hate that when that happens. If you want to see more on that, you can check out a video that I will link to in the description from Berrima Diesel, which is really good at understanding exactly what the turbo problem is with the 4JJ1. And there's also a company in Australia called CCT Turbo, which the website is CC Turbo, get it right, .com.au, and they've got a blog post that I will list also in the description, which basically outlines the fix for the problem that Berrima Diesel notes on the 4JJ1. Okay, they changed the turbo a little bit and put in a 9-bladed impeller instead of the 12-bladed one on the exhaust side, and that led to more real estate for the VGT actuation, I think. I think that's how they got around it anyway, but it's a properly engineered solution. And if you've got that earlier one, this might be quite interesting. Now, it's not clear to me whether the change in the turbo was tremendously significant or just one of those things that I would categorise as marketing wank. How would we know? And therefore, it's not clear to me whether turbo problems systemically in the 4JJ3 have gone away as a consequence, or whether it's just less common now than it was in the 4JJ1. If you've had a turbo go poopy in its trousers in a 4JJ3, then let me know in the comments. Let other Isuzu D-MAX owners know in the comments, especially if you've been rock solid, dude, on the servicing, because that's quite important. You know, turbos are unsympathetic to overdue services because of the speeds at which they operate and the harshness of the environment generally, the temperatures and things of that nature. So anyway, Jay Wood goes on here and goes, I booked the car in for an inspection approx 2 weeks away. I returned to work and specifically did not touch nor disturb any part of the air intake system, as I wanted the dealership to be the first and only people thus far to disassemble this system, apart from one air filter change at the 15,000k service. The car was dropped off at the dealer. Later that day, I returned to collect the car and discuss the warranty replacement situation. Oh, I was greeted with an invoice for $88. Those bastards. A question as to why I was being charged for a warranty repair. I was informed that the turbo failure was not warrantable. The young lady at the servicing counter was very helpful. She then fetched a senior service advisor. He explained to me that a foreign body, Naomi Campbell, Sophia Vergara, on a bearskin rug. I could see that. Who wouldn't see that in their mind's eye at 3 a.m. looking at the ceiling? A foreign body had entered, Sophia had entered the air system and had damaged one blade on the turbo impeller. He believed that this was evident by an impact mark on 2 blades. Of course, I inquired as to what the foreign body was or how it entered the system and where it ended up. He could not explain this. That's going to be kind of important as well. I know this is a bit long-winded, but this is like... when you want to get to the root cause of a problem, you have to understand the mechanism, and I'm going to give you both sides too. I'm going to give you the dealership in just a sec. Anyway, Jay Wood concludes with, quote, after receiving my car back from the dealer, I returned to work. We then pulled the air intake system apart to begin our own investigation. Yes, there was definitely one bent turbo on blade. He sent me a photo. With no impact marks whatsoever. The impact marks the dealer referred to were carbon deposits. And we know this because they came off with a bit of degreaser and a rag. Impact marks don't do that. Pro tip. Anyway, Wangaratta Motor Group responded in writing to Jay Wood, and I'll give you their side of the story now. They go... warranty on any product requires there to be a manufacturing defect related to or causing your complaint, concern or failure. I'd suggest, no, that's not the only reason. It could just be insufficiently durable. So there's that. Unfortunately, in this case, there is... Oh, I'm speaking like Jay Wood, sorry. Unfortunately, in this case, there has been no manufacturing defect found. The sealed air intake system is functioning as designed. A foreign object, such as Sophia, has contacted turbo compressor wheel, causing damage to the fins and bending two fins, one significantly. Yeah, it's pretty fucking bent, dude. We all agree on something at least. From the witness marks, he means scratches and impact damage, of the damage on the fins, it looks like a small screw or bolt has contacted the turbo compressor wheel. Given the mileage on the vehicle, we would have to assume it has been serviced correctly. Therefore, the air filter will have been removed, checked and cleaned or replaced at least once. This leaves the possibility of human error. Those freaking humans, dude. As soon as you build an idiot-proof environment, there we go, inventing better frickin' idiot or human error. And this also leaves the system exposed while this process is taking place. Imagine that being exposed like that, while the filter's being changed or cleaned. If there was any evidence of the aforementioned pre-delivery or manufacturer error, he means aforementioned, but, you know, dealership literacy standards, it should have been found in the above checks of the air filter and intake system as part of the service. Wangaratta Isuzu Ute have inspected, it's has inspected, right? Singular entity, has inspected, and reported on this vehicle as it was presented. Our report and findings are factual and unbiased towards either party. The role of the technician, with a capital T, is to report on his findings and establish if the failure is a manufacturer defect. In this instance, it has been determined that no manufacturing defect is evident. Dude, how freaking convenient. How convenient. How preposterously convenient if you are the dealership or Isuzu. Not so much if you're Jay Wood, I'd suggest. So at this point, Jay Wood has reached out to me with a bunch of photos, including these ones that I'll show you now. So let's unpack this dealership hypothesis, shall we? And what I'm doing is I'm going to show you the photos that show the aspect of the turbo blade that would have had to be struck by the foreign object in order to bend in that direction. Like, in order to bend the turbo blade with a foreign object, it needs to hit the turbo blade on the aspect of the blade that you can see there, all right? And cleaned up like this, with the carbon taken off it with a little judicious use of the degreaser and the high-tech miracle of the frickin' shop rag, there doesn't appear to be any damage, right? Not that I can see in these photos at all, right? So this hypothesis, to me, is already looking a bit shaky. I would hesitate to call it a diagnosis. And I worked in a frickin' testing laboratory that was NADA registered, and I broke shit for a living for 6 months. It's quite therapeutic, but I kind of know what things look like when they break. So I'll never be able to forget some of that stuff. It's quite therapeutic, breaking shit all day long, even in a controlled way. So the turbo, if it's chugging along moderately, if you don't really understand what's going on inside an engine, if a turbo is just kind of loping along, it's doing like 100,000 RPM, just let that sink in. In fact, why don't we just, for convenience, downgrade that to 90,000 RPM, because that makes the mental arithmetic just a little bit easier. So if you crunch the numbers on that, 90,000 RPM divided by 60 is 1,500 revolutions per second. Per frickin' second, dude. Now, the turbo blade is probably about 50 or 60 millimeters in diameter, and when you crunch all of those numbers, right, it's moving at about 240 meters per second, which is ballpark 2.5 football fields a second, right? That's the periphery of the blade doing laps 1,500 times a second. It's a brain bender. You can't think that fast. I can't. You can do the numbers on it, but it's pretty hard to conceptualize it in a visceral sort of way. Know what I mean? It's brain freaking mind-bendingly fast, in other words. So that's about 850 k's an hour, which, if you want to put that in perspective, is pretty much the speed of a cruising jet airliner, okay? Or a 22 short rimfire round coming out of a handgun on the target range is about that, like subsonic 22 is about that fast also. So it's being impacted, and the difference between a bullet and a foreign object of this nature, i.e. a screw or a bolt, is that a bullet is soft, right? A screw or a bolt is typically a fairly hard thing, and it would be unbelievable to suppose that the blade could survive an impact at 850 k's an hour, as fast as a freaking jet or a 22 short round, without suffering some kind of really obvious mechanical damage. Know what I mean? So this quote, small screw or bolt, which is what the dealership said it probably was, just falls in and it hits the turbine at 850 k's an hour, doesn't leave a mark, imagine that, and then just disappears inside the physically closed inlet system, which is a neat trick in my estimation, of which, I don't know, Jesus himself might properly be proud. What were they thinking? And the reductio ad absurdum, I think, of this is that's your, what do they call it, factual and unbiased diagnosis. They'll be $88, thanks very much, which is not bad for a miracle. Like the going rate for a miracle historically has been significantly higher than $88. But in my view, and this is just my personal opinion, this is how you play tennis without the fucking net on the issue of diagnosis, all right? If it's a foreign object and it falls into a closed system, why is there no damage and why can't they find it? So let's get to why can't they find it, okay? Where is this alleged bolt or screw or something of that nature that just fell in while the intake system was quote-unquote exposed during the changeover of the air filter at the 15,000 kilometre service? Where the fuck is it, okay? Because if it gets through the turbo, guess what? It's got to hit the intercooler, and there's a lot of really small passengers inside the intercooler going from the hot side to the cooler side, and guess what? Jamie's mob threw in a bore scope, right? And they had a look on the hot side of the intercooler, and here's what they found.
Today is the 3rd of the 9th. This is the inside of the intercooler. As you can see, there is no damage. There is no foreign object and nothing sitting down the bottom. Yeah, all good, all clear.
So, free loaf of bread with fish and wine. Hashtag may once have been water with every bore scope inspection this month. I'd call it M Day for Miracle Day, although Mazda already has that one trademarked, I'm sure. So at this point, right, Jay Wood is so close to the bottom of the barrel that his email hits me in the nuts, and I kick my query about his situation at being a journalist onto Isuzu Ute Australia for comment. And I will pause it here so that you can read it in its entirety, but it really just says, hey, I'm aware of this guy's problem. Is he fairly representing it? Please tell me if there's something I need to know before I report it on Monday. I need to know by Friday, and I'll need to know in writing because I'm not prepared to report anything that's just verbaled. So anyway, they were really good, surprisingly good. In fact, their spokesperson, Red Hot, gave me the following official statement, okay? So here's what Isuzu Ute Australia says about that. They say, we are aware of Mr. J. Wood's vehicle, and the technical team at Isuzu Ute Australia have investigated the imagery supplied, not just the photos, but the imagery of this unique and unusual situation further. Following discussions with the factory, Isuzu Engineering would like to understand more around the material composition of the foreign object that has entered and damaged a turbocharger. So we're still running with that hypothesis in the deficient evidence domain. But anyway, okay. This is the foreign body that hit the turbo impeller as fast as a .22 caliber short round, didn't leave a mark on it, and then just freaking disappeared. Just like that. Okay. But I suspect we're headed in the right direction. In fact, I know we are, which is good for Jay Wood. So they conclude with Isuzu Ute Australia has contacted Mr. Jay Wood and advised that we will cover the cost to further investigate. That's a split freaking infinitive. To investigate further, surely. The only the shat may split the infinitive. To boldly go. For the rest of us, we go boldly. To boldly go is a shat thing. To go boldly is the rest of us thing, kind of thing. To investigate further and replace the turbocharger. So, on balance, this is a frown gone upside down. So that's great. And I appreciate that this is virtually a breach of the journalist's code of ethics to use one's powers for good and not evil. But here we are. If you'd like to report me to the authorities, I'm confident they could lead me off in cuffs down to the pokey any time now. But Jay Wood was so pleased. There was almost a gun in his pocket, I'm sure, possibly even an AR-15. He was pretty pleased. So, and I have to commend Isuzu for acting to redress this situation. Like, full points where it's due, okay? Like, they became aware of this at a fairly high level in the organisation, and they investigated and they turned his frown upside down. So, 2 thumbs up. However, this is just my opinion too, and it shouldn't matter because they're corporations and they can't sue me for defamation. But in my estimation, Isuzu is kind of like Toyota, you know, and I so want to like the D-MAX and the MU-X because on fundamentals, they are pretty good vehicles. And I've only got one freaking speed hump here, okay? Like Toyota, Isuzu vehicles are generally pretty well engineered. You know, like they just are. The Japanese, when they do it well, they're really good engineers and mass production specialists. They're good at that shit. They've got such a pedigree in the engineering domain. They've almost overtaken Europe on that. In fact, in many ways, quality control and proper mass production, they're in front of Europe for sure. Okay, they for years and years, decades, they built the best built cars in the world. There's no question on that. But like Toyota, when Isuzu fucks up, they tend to do it especially well, and it's epic, and their customer support is terrible. Okay, it just is. There's so much anecdotal evidence that reaches me about denied warranty claims where it should just be a slam dunk of approval that I can't ignore it and say to you that buying an Isuzu is a great idea, even though I think more than 9 times out of 10, if you buy an Isuzu, you're probably doing really well. It's probably going to be a really good, reliable vehicle. It's just that percentage of fuck-ups where it bites owners in the arse. It's almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? It's almost like Mr. Hyde in the service department. Jesus, they could be so much better at it. I don't think they've got the software in place at a high sort of corporate level to cope with their own design fuck-ups / deficiencies, however you'd like to put it. I tend to be pretty black and white about it. I don't think there should be a whole lot of forgiveness for design fuck-ups. Like, that's not what you're in the business to do when you make stuff. You know, when you're a proper engineering organisation, you should get it right. And there should be no apology about it. You know, excuse it away kind of thing when you fuck it up. It's unacceptable, right? The least you can do is to roll out the red carpet to those affected and say, come on in, we're really sorry about that. We fucked up, but we're fixing it. You know, and if you can't do that, that's a problem. It's a particular problem for Isuzu because they've got such a battle for survival in play in their corporation at the moment. And this battle is being fought on not one but 2 fronts, right? Front number 1 is China, obviously, because there's not a day goes by without some new Chinese ute in the market. Today, it's the MG U9, which is an affordable and apparently pretty good ute for the money kind of thing. And there's so many others. There's the Canon Alpha plug-in hybrid, and there's the Shark 6. There's even in the cheap seats something like the JAC T9 or that LDV Teron 9. I don't know what it is about the number 9 or the number 5 or 6 for the Chinese. But anyway, all these cheap entrants are coming in and they're chipping away at the likes of Isuzu, and I'm not seeing a cogent plan to fight back. Like, I'm just not, dude. And then on the other side, there's the government, like the federal government, Chris Bowen's genius plan for net zero. That's actually not a bad term, even though I didn't mean to say that. Net zero is a pipe dream, and yet they're trying to engineer it. And one of the mechanisms for doing that is a thing called the NVES, which I'm sure you've heard of, the new vehicle efficiency standard, which is meant to drive Australians into smaller, more fuel-efficient cars by forcing manufacturers to sell them or imposing large penalties on them if they don't. If you believe Chris Bowen, A, you're a fool, and B, it won't work, but C, he says this doesn't impact the price of vehicles, and I'd say bullshit, because they've had corporate average fuel economy penalties and policies in place in the US for decades now, and Americans still buy big old trucks and gas guzzlers all freaking day long. The experiment with the F-150 Lightning failed in spite of all of this stuff, and you know, Jethro and Cletus don't want to bump around in anything that's not rocking Johnny and Hank with a dirty big Cummins V8 up the front kind of thing, right? It's just, we buy what we want. And in Australia, we want these kinds of utes, but the government is making it especially hard for Isuzu because they don't have a range of small vehicles to offset their CO2 outputs of their MU-X and D-MAX on. So this battle, the Chinese on this front, and Chris Bowen and the might of the federal government on this front, putting the squeeze on Isuzu, the one easy play that they've got that's really cheap and really easy to implement would be just to look after their customers like they were golden. And then you could at least sidestep 9 out of 10 new unknown Chinese manufacturers by saying, look at us, Japanese engineering, world-class product support. This is a compelling message. It's a reason to buy a freaking Isuzu, and all they've got to do is wake up and remain conscious long enough to have a meeting about doing that, seemingly. And it wouldn't even be that many vehicles because they don't have that many problems. They're not proper shitboxes, like they're not Sanyongs, come on, or Volkswagens, or Mercedes-Benzes, or freaking Jeeps or Land Rovers or Jaguars or Alfa Romeos. They're not that. So when that happens, if they have that meeting while conscious, I will start recommending them. But until then, I'm just going to buy something else, dude, as a risk management countermeasure and recommend that you do the same. The bottom line is very sad, I think. I doubt that they would have about faced like this without a reach around from the Antichrist by way of please explain. And I'm a bit gutted by that because although Jay Wood's frown has gone upside down, I wonder how many people like him are out there going under the bus because they didn't manage to, you know, contact the Antichrist when he was receptive to that. And don't get any freaking ideas, dude, because I never say to people, reach out to me with your problems. I don't have time. I got a YouTube channel to run and 2 businesses, as noted earlier. And I rarely get the opportunity to do that kind of thing, and I just don't have the bandwidth for it anyway, right? And all they're asking for is a fair go, like the minimum level of compliance required, not by the frickin' warranty, but by Australian consumer law. It's a legislated protection. And if only the ACCC were conscious 4 days a week, that's all it would take, isn't it? So this so-called diagnosis really needs to be discussed as well, I think, because this is at best confirmation bias, and at worst, this is just my personal opinion, at worst it's looking for a plausible explanation, like an excuse to deny a warranty claim. What can we say that kind of sits with the observations we've made, as long as you don't think about it too hard and deny this warranty claim so we can get the full effect of the repair. Which means, like, if it's a warranty claim, the dealership gets the parts at a wholesale price and then retails them to the customer, and they charge the full freight for their labour to fit them, okay? If it's a warranty claim, Isuzu Australia just handballs the parts to the dealership, and then Isuzu Australia pays the labour for the warranty job to take place. But they do that at a much lower negotiated rate. So for the dealership, there's a hell of a lot more profit in it if there is a paid by the customer repair compared with a warranty job. And to me, this is always a pretty thorny issue, like it's a borderline conflict of interest and a reason to deny more warranty claims than would otherwise seem reasonable, you know. I guess at the best, it's the diagnostic equivalent of a brain fart, this so-called diagnosis, right? And that guts me as well, because we didn't get 12 men to the moon 55 years ago, ballpark, with diagnostic brain farts. We did actual diligent engineering and we got the job done.